All right, so today we're going to be diving deep into a case, a judge's decision,
Uh,
all the way from 2016 to divorce. Gillian and Scott Shawyer.
And you weren't kidding about high conflict when you teased this one. This Ontario case has got it all. Custody battles, we've got allegations of stalking, even some like cyber warfare type stuff going on. It's wild.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because it's Ontario, you know. You don't really think about Ontario and think high conflict divorce.
It's not the first place that comes to mind, right? But, appearances can be deceiving.
Okay, so before we get into all of the accusations, the nitty-gritty,
Hmm.
set the stage for us. Who are Gillian and Scott Shawyer?
So, married 1998, separated January 5th, 2014. Two daughters caught in the middle of it all. Emma, who was 11 at the time, and Kira, just 8 years old.
They sound, on paper at least, like kind of your average family going through a divorce.
Until it all hit the fan. Yeah.
Hmm.
One of the things that really stuck out to me, the judge in this case, Justice Mitro, right away in his decision, he points out that both Gillian and Scott are well-educated.
Really?
Yeah. Almost like he was a little surprised by the level of, animosity flying around given their backgrounds.
I mean, you would think that higher education equals, at least you would hope, higher ability to resolve conflict in a healthy way.
You'd hope. But I think this case really highlights how, intelligence and then relationship skills are not always one and the same. Even with the best intentions, things can get messy really fast, especially when you're talking about something as emotionally charged as, well, divorce and custody.
And this one gets messy fast. So right away, Gillian, she wants to relocate with the girls to Blue Mountain ski resort area. They own a chalet there. And Scott is completely opposed, like vehemently opposed to this idea.
Yeah, and, relocating children in a shared custody situation, it's a big deal. It's not something that family law takes lightly because you're talking about disrupting their lives, their routines, their school, their friends, their relationship with the other parent. It's a lot to consider.
And it's so interesting to me that, okay, so they own this chalet together in Blue Mountain, and that's where Gillian wants to relocate to, but it gets even more complicated, right?
Oh, he does, yeah. The chalet itself becomes kind of this point of contention. Justice Mitro actually put in place what's called a nesting order for the chalet.
A nesting order, what is that?
So essentially it means that the kids had exclusive use of the place, regardless of which parent was with them on any given weekend.
Wait, so Scott would take the girls there on his weekend, Gillian on hers, all while this huge fight about moving there permanently is going on.
It's a very unique situation, but I think it speaks to this desire to, at least on some level, put the children first, to try and maintain some semblance of normalcy and routine for them, even as their parents were at odds. Which, that's something...
There's like a glimmer of hope in all of this, maybe?
Maybe, but then, well, let's just say things take a bit of a turn.
A turn how? What happens?
Well, Gillian's concerns about this move, they went beyond just, the logistics of it all. She made some pretty serious accusations against Scott.
Like what?
Claiming that he was stalking her, that he was tapping her phone, even like hacking into her computer. Stuff like that.
Wow. Okay, hold on. So we're talking like full-on spy thriller territory now.
It gets intense.
Did she have any proof to back up these claims?
That's the thing. And this is where the judge's perspective, I think, is really interesting. He points out in his decision that Gillian, she didn't present any hard evidence to actually support these accusations.
So even in the midst of, I mean, we've already established this is a very messy divorce. You still have to have proof, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's important for people to remember that even in family court, the judge is looking for evidence, not just accusations.
So Gillian's claims about Scott, those kind of didn't go anywhere.
Not exactly, no, because then the tables get turned a little bit.
What do you mean?
Well, remember how I said things take a turn? We find out from the judge's decision that Gillian had actually been recording Scott's phone calls.
No way.
Yeah, without his knowledge. Specifically, his phone calls with the kids.
Oh, wow. So it's like this secret recording situation going on top of everything else.
Exactly. And I think for me, this is where it starts to get really interesting from like an ethical standpoint, too.
For sure, for sure. Because on one hand, you have these serious allegations, but then on the other hand, you have this secret recording. It's a lot.
Yeah.
What did the judge, I mean, how did he even handle this?
It seems like he was, understandably, a little bit skeptical of both sides, to be honest.
Okay.
He denied Gillian's request for a restraining order against Scott. He didn't feel that, based on the evidence presented, that her fears were justified.
So score one for Scott then.
Well, not so fast. Because then Scott had also requested a restraining order, at least partially, and that request was granted.
Wait, really? What does Scott want a restraining order for?
He wanted Gillian to stop talking to the kids about this potential move to Blue Mountain.
Interesting.
And this is where a small detail that might seem insignificant, it becomes really important.
Okay, what's the detail?
When Gillian was discussing these conversations with her kids, she used the word forced. And the judge, he picked up on that.
Oh, he noticed that.
He saw it as a sign that Gillian was putting pressure on the kids, trying to influence them in the middle of this whole relocation battle.
So even though she's saying she wasn't trying to sway them, her words betrayed her a little bit.
It seems that way. And remember, this is all happening while they're trying to navigate this already contentious custody battle.
It's just a lot. It's a lot for anyone to process, let alone two young girls who are stuck right in the middle of all of this.
Exactly. And it highlights how quickly things can just spiral in these high conflict divorces, even with, I'm sure, the best intentions. Sometimes things just...
It's just hard to see the forest for the trees when you're in that situation, I guess.
Yeah, and it doesn't end there. There's actually more to the story, more to unpack about how this judge navigated this really complex case.
Okay, so we've got restraining orders, secret recordings, this whole nesting order thing that just sounds, honestly, exhausting to even think about. What else was the judge... how did he even begin to sort through all of this?
Well, and I think this is important. It wasn't just about the accusations, the legal back and forth. Justice Mitro, he seemed really tuned in to how Gillian and Scott were behaving as parents throughout this whole ordeal.
Right, because at the end of the day, that's what actually matters here. Right, like the well-being of Emma and Kira.
Exactly. And, the judge's decision, it doesn't hold back. He calls them both out, Gillian and Scott, for essentially using their children as pawns in their own battle.
Were there any specific examples of that in the case?
Yeah, well, remember we were talking about the chalet, that nesting order?
Yeah.
The judge, he noted that both parents were showing up at, ski club events and stuff, even when it wasn't their designated weekend with the kids.
Oh, yeah. He called them out on that.
He saw right through it, Basically said they were hiding behind this for the children kind of act, when really it just seemed like more competition between the two of them.
It's kind of heartbreaking when you think about it,
Yeah.
Like these two parents so caught up in their own issues that they lose sight of the fact that their kids are watching their every move,
Yeah.
feeling stuck in the middle of it all.
And that's what makes this case so fascinating to me, but also really sad. It forces us to confront the fact that these high conflict divorces, they have very real consequences. It's not just a legal battle, it's an emotional one. And everybody involved gets impacted, And I think we have to remember, too, all that we've discussed, this wasn't even the final trial.
Wait, really? So this was just like a pre-show to the main event?
In a way, yeah. It was an interim hearing, which means the judge was making temporary decisions, about custody, access, those restraining orders, all kind of in preparation for a full trial down the road.
Wow. So everything was still up in the air.
Exactly. And I think that's why this particular case, even though it's from 2016, it's still so relevant. It really illustrates how the family law system, while it's designed to help to provide stability and resolution, especially for children, the process itself can sometimes actually make the conflict worse.
Because it's almost like it encourages this win at all costs mentality, right? Like you're so focused on proving the other person wrong that you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's a really delicate balance to strike. And I think our deep dive into this case, this look into, Gillian and Scott's story, it's a good reminder that while legal decisions, they happen in courtrooms, the effects, they're felt far beyond that.
It really makes you think, I'm being honest, going into this, it's easy to kind of want to pick a side to judge Gillian and Scott for their choices, but...
It's human nature to want to do that, right? We gravitate towards one side or the other.
Right.
But I think what this case really highlights are the nuances, the gray areas that exist in these situations, and how important it is to remember there's always more than one perspective.
Right. Multiple sides to every story.
Exactly. And, we may never know the full truth of what happened between Gillian and Scott, but hopefully this deep dive today gave everyone listening a little bit of insight into, just how complicated divorce can be, the family law system, and how it all impacts, especially the children involved.
It definitely has given us a lot to think about. If you could give one piece of advice to couples who might be going through something similar, what would it be?
Well, that's a tough one. I think just try to remember the why you're doing this. Remember that at the center of it all are children who just want to be loved and protected.
And not treated like pawns in a game.
Exactly. So it's about finding a way to move forward together, even if it's messy, even if it's hard, and putting those kids first.
Because ultimately that's what matters.
That's what matters. It's a journey, not a destination, right?
That's a great way to put it. It's a journey. Well, on that note, that's going to wrap it up for this deep dive. Thank you for listening.